Welcome to another episode of Talk That Get Results. I'm Webbo Herbert, and as per usual, we're here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out who can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to the Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis, or give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or a comment, perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that you're well organized, and when you get on the show you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we will not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards, but we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Again, thank you all for joining us. Your voice in the community, Talk That Get Results. You can also follow our video stream of this program on our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio and our YouTube channel at Vaughan Radio. Thank you all again for joining us. Your voice in the community, Talk That Get Results. Tonight, Conrad Nair Liebert, good evening. Conrad Nair Liebert, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to your staff here at Vaughan Radio on this splendid evening. To my colleagues, Mr. Stanley and Mr. Fifield, good evening. And to all my friends in the international circle, I welcome you once again to this program, socially orientated program where we discuss issues affecting the people. Sometimes we go down the road of politics and even just entertainment and other areas of life here on Nevis. I welcome everyone this evening to tune in and be part of this episode. Of course, this is the Easter coming up. Some may have things to say about the Easter, about the way they're going to be spending their Easter. And of course, we have a packed year of celebration here in Nevis. We got the 50th anniversary of our Culturama, so I suppose that we can have a hearty discussion this evening. Webbo, I'm so happy that you invite me once again, and I say thank you.
Roger Fifield, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Also want to say a special good evening to those who are viewing and those who are listening via the various media. Webbo, as my colleague would have said, we are here to learn, we are here to educate, and of course Easter is just around the corner, as we would say. And Culturama coming up, lots of events are coming up, and I'm sure we can have a wonderful discussion tonight, Webbo. Once again, thank you, Webbo, for having me on this program.
Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my fellow panelists, and good evening to the people of St. Kitts and more especially the people of Nevis, those who listen to us on the World Wide Web and throughout the Caribbean Basin, and, of course, via Facebook and the various platforms through which and on which our Vaughan Radio is being featured. This evening, of course, is quite important my first take, water. I formulated my dissertation around the water issue on Nevis. And after that I heard on the news clip Minister Brand mentioning about cisterns. Well, my first take when I got here, simply because I lived in other jurisdiction where government water is not available, and every house constructed has to have a cistern. So when I came, I actually put a cistern down, and they're easy to build. And those who are in the building trade who doesn't have all the application and skills, I'm going to give you a little training tonight as to how simply you could build a cistern. You could build a cistern above ground, but ensure that the bottom is glazed and the four sides are glazed with strong cement, sand and water, but more sand, more cement than sand, so that upon completion and the water gets in, you would not begin to show any signs of deterioration because of the liquefied content inside, which would be water. That building to the front at Stanley's would be a testament to what I'm saying to you this evening. Based on that, that cistern is built above ground, and when you go inside or even stay outside and you look at the walls are still intact without any deterioration, and as a result it is there, and I hope it will be there for 100 years. It built out of cinder blocks, concrete blocks, with steel inside. All the holes are filled, the black holes, and it is plastered outside but glazed inside with that rich mortar, more cement than sand. And as a result, you would not see the pilferage or any sign of decay with reference to mold, mildew, as the case might be. So those of you who are building, and I'm going to give a shout out to the government, meaning they should mandate that every house now be built with a cistern. And to be honest, where you find the money, you just put on 0.01% tax on every property in Nevis, and that would defray the cost of each person putting a cistern into the home or building that they are going to construct. Naya.
Yes, the water situation. Something happened. I'm not sure. I was told much later that a pump had broken down. And, you know, these things does happen. It's not like we've been having crucial water problems here in Nevis. I don't think we have been. So, you know, when these things happen, sometimes we can find a room of tolerance and understanding. In this case, I don't see much of a difference, because previous to this situation, we have been having a big water situation. I frequently hear the government making plans to improve on the water situation, improve on the water storage situation, and at the same time encourage people to build cistern or some kind of water storage facility, on their premises, and all that is good stuff. I personally don't like a cistern under my house at all. Others may like it. I suppose, Mr. Stanley, if it's well constructed, but too many homes I'm seeing whereby the cistern seems to be experiencing some kind of seepage. You can actually see the mold coming on the outside, and I don't know. There's a problem with the steel in this cistern. I guess if it's not properly embedded, it starts corrodes and create problems. Even on top of the cistern, sometimes the tiles are difficult to hold properly, and sometimes they unearth themselves, meaning they unstick themselves and come up and so forth. So I, for one, will go more for some form of container in my yard, or even something that built away from my house, but a cistern under my house is not something I personally would prefer, and I don't think the government should make that mandatory. Of course, they should continue the program of encouraging that we have some, way of catching water. Of course, that's just even personal responsibility, and for drinking and other usage, and so on. Of course, here in the area of Morningstar, Stanley's, those areas suffered quite a bit. I'm not sure if it was broadcast or how early it was, but I think the shortage, the problem of no water on a Sunday did impact on the public. But I'm happy that it was resolved this soon. And as I say, if we are fair thinking and fair players, and even if we are critics like I am sometimes, I wouldn't have too much an elongated statement or comments to make on what had happened, because as I said, these things does happen. Of course, we can always say government should be aware and they should have spare parts. I personally is not really aware of the nitty-gritty of it all, the problem, so I can't comment much, but we hope that such things won't happen. And when they do happen, I expect the public to be reasonable, given the situation that we are not really plagued by, water problem here in Nevis, and water is still, to me, very inexpensive, not very expensive, and so I'm happy that the administration gets things up and working again, and I suppose it would be a learning experience.
Yes, Naya. I want to just back up a bit and speak to the cartridge or the containers, including cisterns. And I am not sure that the government should mandate that persons building houses should have a cistern under their house as well. I had a conversation with someone earlier this week, or late last week perhaps, and I asked that person if they had a cistern under their house, and the person said no. And in conversation, trying to find out, well, why not, the person said, they had some encounters with water, almost drowned at least 2 times. Hence the reason they do not want any cistern under their house. I think what should probably happen is that, as Naya alluded to, the government, should encourage persons to have some sort of catchment, even if it's outside, so to speak, cistern, but not necessarily under your home. I mean, years ago, when I was growing up, we had what we call tanks all around the island. And I think just recently, with the construction of the roads, maybe back in 2001, 2004, 2006, thereabout, a lot of these tanks, went out of commission. They are no longer in use. Some are still standing, while others were cleared away, I suppose, for the expansion of the roads. But nonetheless, I want to believe that is important for us. And we really felt it, especially on a Sunday, as Naya said, no water. I listened to the water personnel, I think it might have been on Facebook, and they said they had some mechanical problems, with the pumping system. I think would have been the Friday. However, home by me, we were out of water, I think, most of Sunday, maybe Sunday morning, right, all Sunday. And I was amazed when I went to the Bat Stream to bathe Sunday evening, the number of persons that were there. When I see the amount of vehicles parked, if I didn't know differently, I would have thought that they had some sort of function, maybe leading up to Culturama. And you might be laughing, Stanley, but I'm really serious. And then I went again last night, to bathe at the Bat Stream, and the numbers weren't as big as the previous night. But in conversation with persons there, they said the Monday morning down there was really packed again with a number of persons. So I'm saying this to say that we are not accustomed in these modern days to what we call carry water or head water. So we must be cognizant that the water system may go down at some point in time. It can be a mechanical failure, as was the case recently, or it can be some other failure or some other means. And we have to ask ourselves, if we do not have a cistern or some catchment, where can we get water? Most persons, they do not have even what we call a kit, a butter kit, in their houses. And so we have to ask ourselves, where can we get water to cook? Maybe not so much drinking, because most persons now, they buy bottled water. So where can we get water to cook? Where can we get water to bathe? And this bathing thing, to go to work, a lot of persons, I think they use it as an excuse. Maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but we're talking about water. And they use it as an excuse not to come to work. And I often ask, if you were supposed to catch a plane 8 o'clock, the same morning you don't have any water, you would have stayed home and say you don't have any water to bathe and allow the flight to go without you? I mean, these are serious questions we have to ask ourselves. We have to prioritize. We have to understand what we want, to be incorporated in our property, on our property, how we are going to utilize our funds in trying to get what we want done. As I said, gone are the days when we used to go over the gut, at least in my area, or go to New River, where we call yard, to head water and even to wash. I can recall as a small boy, there is no running water, the tank is empty, and we had to get the bath pan and put on our heads and our donkeys, and we head to yard, that's New River. and there's a big cistern there. It's the property is fenced now, so persons I suppose can't access it, readily as before. But we used to go there. We used to wash. Sometime when we wash, we bring back home our clothes, the wet clothes, we hang them out and we play, and and then we bring them back when they are dry. But I am not seeing this. I'm not seeing this. We used to go partial. We used to go and play. Young persons now are in houses playing on devices. I'm not seeing this. I'm just not seeing a youngster walking from Zion to market shop, for instance, for water anymore. I'm just not seeing that. So I am saying, if we know this is how we are trending, this is where we are going, I am saying let's start to cater for when there are failures on the government main lines, that we have something to piggyback on.
We are too dependent on government for a lot of things, and we should have a different thinking, a different kind of thinking. And like I said, I lived in another jurisdiction for 24 years, and there is no government water to that house, to houses. As a result, we had to build system and ensure that you use adequate amount of water sparingly. But I could tell you, a lot of that water that the government produces at below cost is wasted by many of these homes. Children, they get into the shower, it feels good, and they allow the water to run unabated. And I'm saying to you, if there is a cost, then they would find an alternative. I'm saying to the government, the time has come for it to be mandated, and you don't have to look anyplace else but to increase property tax 0.001% over a long period of time. And you'll be able to get every system, every house that is under construction built with a small system, water catchment. Now you mentioned about the steel rusting.
Yes.
Do you know that those tanks that are built, you ever seen them crack, rust?
Which tank you're talking about?
Anyone that is made from concrete.
Yeah, I see it crack. I saw tanks crack. I saw cistern cracks. I saw.
I'm not talking about the cistern. Those are built by the old artisans.
That's a different thing, because they don't use much steel.
Regardless to how the application, the construction application, is apropos, as a consequence, they last without cracks. How did they do it?
But Stanley, in yesteryear, our forefathers, they never really used cement. They used terrace.
We understand all that, but I know, fast forward a little, even the absence of terrace, you don't see those water catchment that are made from concrete, steel, water, cement and sand simply because of the construction application I just mentioned.
And another thing too, Stanley, that might contribute to the cracks, it might be the curing of the sand. You know, is the sand really cure the salt that would have dried out of the sand sufficiently? And if not, then maybe is the mixture, the proportion of cement to sand, is it a shortcut maybe? Why it's
I'm saying to you, the old artisans, those of us who learned from the old artisans, know the construction application which would withstand the test of time. And I'm trying to challenge Naya.
Okay.
You go and you see these four-corner concrete structures or masonry structures, and you don't see any pilferage. Do you, Naya?
You see, we're talking from historic days, like what we see coming from the old sugar plantations and so, from those era.
Well, what I'm saying to you, some of them still standing.
Some of them still standing, and some
And
of
I'm
them
saying to you,
pretty well sealed.
they don't have any pilferage.
Like the cistern he's talking about in New River, that big circular cistern, right? That's still pretty much intact in every way.
Look, listen,
And there are a few of them around the island.
some are of masonry in totality. Masonry.
Hmm.
Some are reinforced by stone, natural stone. The inner portion is concrete,
Always.
and there is no steel in them. But I'm saying to you, my house, the front house up at church ground, has a cistern right in the front, and it is built above ground, and the inside is glazed, like I mentioned. The bottom is glazed, so water, which is a universal solvent, has an impossibility to pass through that glazed mortar application. And as a result, you would never see in the walls pilferage in terms of deterioration.
Okay, yes, because you're saying that you use a mix
Right,
of more cement than sand,
quite so.
I can
and
see
that is quite unusual. It is quite unusual in the modern day context. How much people you see mixing a mix and putting more cement than sand?
Listen,
But you have said it.
you
have said
can't
it,
be,
and-
you can't be a penny wise and a pound foolish. All right. So if you scarve, that's a old time statement, old time terminology. It's going to cost you elsewhere.
But that's the method, and I hope people are listening.
All right.
Because too many of us, I suppose, in these days. I mean, if you work in construction, they say it's 1 to 3. 1 bucket of cement to 3 buckets of sand.
So you have to increase the cement
You turn it around.
content.
I agree with you, because cement hardens, and of course the water inside is creating, as you say, is a universal solvent. But as I made the point before, too many cisterns I've seen recently of homes that have cistern, and you can see the seepage that coming through the wall. You
If
can
it's
see
not properly done,
a lot of cracking start taking place if it's in the area of the cistern and so forth.
if it's not properly
If
done,
it's not properly done,
at the same
I
time,
take that on board. I agree with you. It's not properly done.
Stanley, I know years ago, I believe that we used to get a brand of cement by name of Portland.
Portland is with cement is cement.
Right. No, you may say cement is cement.
Cement is cement.
But what I understand from speaking to persons in construction is that the cement of yesteryear was stronger than the cement of today. And if that is so, then if they used to apportion it 1 bucket of cement to 3 buckets.
Well, you have to change the formula.
Exactly my point. But what I'm saying, they might be very well keeping that same formula.
If you
Hence the reason why the system would crack.
If you keep the formula, 1 bucket of cement to 3 buckets of sand and 3 buckets of stone, as the case might be, it's poor.
Right, but remember you just said cement is cement. And
Meaning you have to double up on the cement in order to get the right mix so as to prevent the outcome of pilferage.
But do those in construction know that? Do
They do
all
know.
or they know?
They know.
Okay.
I'm not telling you all of them know. All of them don't know. Or those who know, the application in terms of scarving keeps more money into somebody's pocket.
You see, Stanley, I have an idea about mixing, aggregate. I once used to make hand blacks with machine,
Right.
with a hand machine.
And matter of fact, you might have used maybe a half a bucket of cement to
No.
because the objective is to ensure that the block comes out.
You're stretching it too much.
No,
man.
the block comes out standing because it would be strengthened
As it cure.
as it cures.
Right,
You understand me? So I would challenge you that the cement used would be less than a bucket.
The point I really wanted to make, Stanley, is that depending on the aggregate that you are using, whether it's what we call gut mole, or it's sometimes terrace is added to it, or you get what the aggregate from the crusher, from the
Stone.
right.
Stone dust.
It's all depending on what aggregate you are using. Then you would know how to apportion the cement to that mixture
I hear you loud and clear, but I will tell you
that you use.
whether you're going to use gut sand or gut mole or terrace or stone dust requires the same application. If you want something to be strong,
No, I am gonna differ. I'm gonna differ here, Stanley, for a number of reasons. If we look at the stuff that we are now getting from the government quarry, what is called at Valley. That's just before you meet New River and you go up to the top of Valley, or what we call locally Wally, where the government quarry is at now. I can recall when we used to make blocks. We used to go there with pick and pitax, and we used to dig that hill. And the blocks that were made from that aggregate, even they felt heavier.
well, they go heavy.
You could have used less.
Cement.
You could have used less cement with that particular stuff. The same stuff what they used to throw on the road now. And you have a binding, what I call some sort of natural binding agent. If you recognize when you put it on the road and you press it in, you hold it for at least some time. Because in my mind, you have a natural binding agent. And when that is mixed with the cement, you could have afforded to use less cement.
Cheat.
I am telling you, whether you want to call it cheat, I want to call it economizing, whatever terminology you want to. Now, let's call it treat. Let's use the term treat. You have a cup, and you're going to make a cup of tea. You're going to use brown sugar. You're going to use straw sugar. I'm not saying straw sugar anymore, but you're going to use brown sugar. You're going to use straw sugar, and you're going to use white sugar. You're going to use the same number of spoon for each when you're going to make tea with each of the sugar.
Well,
because it's sugar.
No,
Oh, okay.
no.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think we've gone all over the place here. We're talking about specifically water and cistern. And I must support Mr. Stanley in this. Because a leaking cistern is the most difficult thing to stop leaking. It's
Quite
almost
yes.
impossible.
Quite so.
And so I will agree with Mr. Stanley to go overboard with the cement.
No, but
Go overboard with the cement that when you done your cistern, there is no possibility of it being leaking now or even into the distant future.
20 years, 30 years from
right,
now.
right, and I understand and I appreciate that, and I am not saying we are on the same line, and not even the same page. But what I was speaking to in that is in terms of the mixture, and what I really wanted to come to the fore. If persons in construction now, do they realize, what Stanley is saying, that they should use more to glaze, to glaze the cistern? Are they doing that? But when I was speaking about the portion of these aggregate, it was because Stanley was speaking about the mixture. So that's the point I really wanted to bring. Maybe it come out a little disjointed, but that is the point I really wanted to be. But I support, of course I support. It's not easy that you're going to build a house and you're going to build a cistern under your house, especially. And then after 2 years, you have to repair it, perhaps. You got the extra mile. You spend an extra couple $100, $500 as the case may be, buy a couple of extra bags of cement, and you mix it as strong as needed for it to last as long as maybe 100 years. So you won't get any argument from me with that at all. I don't see why people would go shortcut when they are building a home for them. And I believe when people build houses normally outlast humans. And when we are building, I believe that we must build with a mindset that we are not building just for ourselves, but maybe 1 or 2 generations on.
Sometimes.
So, okay, fine.
Well, let me give a shout out, because I believe Minister Brand might be listening, and I don't want him to think that I am so negative. I'm trying to say, go back into the house, mandate that every house built beginning today.
Let me get this, please. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
Yeah, I just wanted to put my little 2 cents in. You talking about mixtures in concrete and mortar and so forth. But when it comes to glazing and those kind of things, you don't necessarily have to go overboard with your mixture. You could maintain the mixture. But then when it comes to glazing, what we normally do, I've seen that from way back, those older
Artisans.
masons and so forth. What they do, they mix what they call a lager, and they dash the wall. When it comes to the bottom of the cistern, they mix that dry stuff with the cement and sand, more cement, and they spread it over, and they glaze it, You know, you don't need no tower steel and all this kind of thing. That thing will stand up for years. Yes, I thought I would just add my penny.
All right, thank you.
That's what exactly Mr. Stanley's saying, right?
Well, what I'm saying, Minister Brandley, if you're listening, please go back and recommend to the Honorable Dr. Mark Brantley pass this legislation, and it will be cheaper on the government. It will be less strain on the government and less criticism for the government.
Pass legislation for what?
Mandating at every house that is constructed in Nevis is constructed with a system.
So they must go back and do it again.
I don't think it's well, of course, Webbo, you might be up to date, more up to date than I am with reference to the structure of a system.
We're not talking about the structure of a system. You said they must go and legislate it. Legislate that every house built must have a system.
Right.
So I ask you if they must go and re-legislate it.
Well, I'm asking you if you are aware.
Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening. About this topic is very interesting, right? But I grew up in Bath, and I was away for a very long time. And the place where I live is more hills than anything else. And all of the systems are underground. In addition to that, you cannot build a house in that place where I come from, where I lived for over 40 years, unless it's been approved by the building board. You must have a system, and you're not going to pass it.
Quite so.
And I am since I came back here, I don't understand how people building houses without system. Whether it's outside or underneath. The house that I live in here have a small system in it. And the neighbor next door, every time the water go off, he come by this water. I'm not even using the government water. It's a small system where you can't use it unless you really got a stamina drought or something.
Right.
So and the older folk knew this. I have where I grew up, there's a system outside out of stone. It's still there. The only thing probably may be wrong with it, you maybe have to go inside and, like somebody will mention, glazing, right? And go and fix up inside. It still works. And that's how all the dams that we have in each village in Nevis were made up. Most of them was made from. So there's one day in Bath, when I left here over 40 years ago, there was no water going up from that dam anywhere over there. We go to the Bath and we build, and we come to, as a matter of fact, we have one girl get a nickname, because when the water dry up, when it didn't come from government into that dam, the guy used to put a stick and do some little strip, and then the water touch the stick and it run out. And everybody lining up there to get that what we call that's what you're using to drink. So I don't understand why people are not building systems when they build a house. And I went and did a little research, and it's in the law here. It didn't say system, it's a catchment.
Well,
right? So
yeah.
it don't necessarily have to be a system underground, but you have to have something to secure your own personal water.
That is correct.
You know, so
What is correct?
what they do in those, because the land is not like Nevis have relatively flat land until you start to go up the hill, right? And when you go up in that place where I lived for a long time, you can't do that because the land is so steep. You have to build to come to get a level, and down there is where you put the system. So I understand now your point, but I mean, that's what you have to do. And what we use, somebody mentioned it before, but that's what you do. You put on the clay, and those guys from the islands who know about building and stuff, you still get something they call a tail seal, and you put that inside the system. The only problem you have with those systems, right? Because because I had a system there where a lady had 35,000 gallons of water. If you're not using the water, a gallon of water weighs 6 pounds. A cubic foot of water weighs like 64 point something pounds. Imagine that weight, right? And the size and the bottom of the system. It's going to give some time. You have to use the water. But very rarely you find that happening. But to say that you depending on the government, what I must give the government some kudos here, because you lose a pump. But they were good enough and smart enough to have one in storage. Had they not have that pump in storage, we'll be out of water for at least 3-4 weeks. Because you have to order the part. So I don't hear nobody talking much about that, but I hear the minister talk about it. They had a pump in stock. And they need to have parts for these pumps as well in stock, so that when these crises happen, which you have no control over, and some people trying to blame the government and the water department and all of that, but hey, things happen. So that's my real 2 cents, huh?
All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay.
So, what I'm saying is that the government can find a method of saying to the people, build.
Maybe let's take this. I'll get back to you. Good evening. Thank you for holding. Good evening. You're on the air.
Evening. Good evening. Speaking about tariffs. Speaking about cement. What about lime?
Caller, what
about lime?
What I would like,
lime?
Caller, what I would want you to do, please, is you're already speaking on the air. We're hearing you. You go right ahead and say what you have to say. Do not listen to the radio or the computer or whatever you're listening to. Okay? You're going to hear us through your phone. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening. I'd like to add a couple of pointers here. We started out talking about water not being available, and then we went up on cisterns. Now, I'd like to go back a bit. Back in the 50s, we had problems in Nevis with water, and a lot of problems. And people used to be getting up 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the morning and going long distances with a bucket to get some water to get ready to go to school and all that kind of business. The other thing too, a lot of people used to have what we call a copper in the yard to catch water. Some people used to have drums, and the spouting come down from the roof and go in the drum to catch a little bit of water when it rained. We drifted away from all of that kind of thing, and we got too complacent and just depend on the water running out the pipe every time. If people would go and you have a lot of drums all over the place. You got the drums at TDC and Hartford and all about the places. You get a drum you put in your yard and you hook up your spout as usual and you catch your water. You're not going to use it every day. You use it when you do not have water running in the pipe. You have to learn to improvise. And as far as the government is telling, Mr. Gentleman says the government should be charging people taxing if they don't have cistern. That is ludicrous. Then everybody could afford to be building cistern. Cistern costs a lot of money. It takes a lot of money to build a cistern. Because you're talking about mixing aggregate and all that kind of business, but the pump truck had to come and pump concrete down inside the farm to build a cistern. It ain't like how you put blocks together and you put them up and you run and go. You got to cast concrete, and concrete costs big money and time too. So we got to sort of get away from this idea of trying to blame government and find excuses and find ways that we can get water and do what we have to do, because water is very essential. You're going to go, if you ain't got to go to school, sure, you get a couple of drums or whatever and put in your yard and get some water. How much water a child need to bathe? You don't a whole drum to bathe. Because back in the day, never used to do that. I know people used to go walk for over a mile to go get water, and sometimes when they're reaching home, the roads are unpaved. Next thing you know, somebody stopped it all, they fall along, they throw the water, they gotta go back. This is what Nevis was like. We're not going back in them days, but at least we could learn from what we did back then and make it better now. So let's start to concentrate and figure out a way to ease the burden and make it easier for people to get what they need instead of having to go way out of the way we ain't accustomed to, because out there it ain't going to be easy and it ain't going to be cheap. Okay? Good night. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Edric.
I believe enough rain falls in Nevis for it to be sustained in terms of water catchment, as the case might be.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, gentlemen. I am not sure it's a good idea to be going backward. When I say going backward, if we become accustomed to pipe water systems, which are obviously a feature of modern day living, we shouldn't be going back. What we should do is have, I wouldn't say a system, but a tank for emergencies, whether it be when the piping supply is interrupted, whether by hurricane or mechanical breakdowns or whatever, that there is a backup system, right? And this could be gravity fed, if you really want to be efficient, shall we say, gravity fed that automatically goes into the regular piping for the house. The thing I like about government supply is that it is coordinated. So we're kind of assured, and I guess frequently tested. So we're kind of assured of quality of the quality. When you have lots of systems up and down the place, you can't be sure of the water quality. Okay, you can use that water for other domestic purposes, like flushing toilets, even bathing perhaps. But certainly when it comes to drinking, we should be very cautious about the water we drink. Okay? And so I like I said, I don't think we should be going backwards. I somehow the water department in both St. Kitts and Nevis have dropped the ball on water. There was a time when it had become very reliable, 24 hours. And now it's almost like we have to get accustomed to now water going at 8 o'clock or whatever time period it is. And for a country that is boasting of being high in the best in the Caribbean insofar as the Human Development Index is concerned, we should not be having these kinds of problems. I think with our utility, we're certainly not the water utility. Okay.
Okay.
All right then.
Okay. Thank you. So go ahead.
Webbo, I wanted to first find out if the caller was calling from Nevis or some other place. Because what I can say to the caller is that 99, or let me rephrase, a large majority of persons living here on island and Nevis do not drink the water that comes from the government main. Most persons would either drink bottled water or cistern water. So I'm not sure if I fully understand what he was saying in terms of that, because persons do not rely on government water for drinking purposes.
But the question though is, why do they not drink it? Is it because it is not potable? or it is just a preference?
It's possibly a preference, because as the caller would have alluded
Okay,
to.
so if it is a preference, right, we can have a robust discussion. If nothing is wrong with the water that is supplied, and you have a preference of paying $10 for 2 little bottles, as opposed to $10 for 1,000 gallons from the government. You see where I'm going with that? So when you end up talking about the cost of it, is a preference, right? Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening. I like the idea about encouraging every home to push the system. And I think that we have got the ball along the way in terms of the dams that used to be around the island. We have destroyed some, and the majority of them don't have any water. So I think there should be a mechanism of putting back water into the dams around the island.
All right, thank you. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webbo. I am listening. Good evening to everyone on your panel. I'm listening to the conversation, quite interesting. But I'm asking myself, where do you guys live? In Nevis? Nobody's been drinking cistern water in years. Remember those weird-looking frogs that would fly around when they came into the island some years back? I have a cistern at my house, and it's full of them. I don't even want that water to clean with, much less to drink or to do anything in my house. Nobody in Nevis, as far as I know, drinks the water from their cistern anymore.
And you would agree, work with me, you did emphasize as far as you know, correct?
Yes.
And you would also accept that you do not know the drinking habits of everybody on Nevis. You agree with that?
Yes. What about you?
Work with me. So the point that you're making, and we must emphasize, that is as far as you know, correct?
Well, about nobody in Nevis drink water from the cisterns anymore. That's been going on for a long time. Oh, really? Okay. God be with you.
I don't, but I know a lot of people who
I drink water called that.
So caller, so you would accept that, well, you probably just got this one differently?
No, Webbo.
But what I'm saying is, so you put forth, work with me, work with me.
For a long time.
I understand that you're making that point, but what I'm saying is, you make the point and you verily believe it. Naya is making a contrary view point and he verily believes it.
Okay, all right. You guys have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
One of the ways
that, work with me.
Yeah.
That is one of the things maybe we should do more of, because a lot of the debates, well, I don't know if it's debate, but a lot of the things that we do, we don't have challenges, right? People just say things and nobody cross-examines. So what happens there, what if we didn't have a little cross-examination with Naya and the caller? Then one or the other will go as gospel. So we leave the listener now to discern whether Naya is right or the caller is correct or both of them are in fact correct. You see what I'm saying? That's what a good debate is. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. I was just listening to the caller who just called, and she was saying that nobody in Nevis drinks cistern water. That is absolutely incorrect. a lot of places in Nevis still use cistern water from their own system. I just wanted to, be contrary to that person who just called in.
Okay.
That we do drink our cistern water.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Another way of putting that could be also hypothetically of finally finding out who is Mr. Nobody, which is me. Good evening, thank you. That's funny. Right, so the other point that I wanted to point out though, I noticed Edric dropped it, but for the benefit of the callers, and one of the callers earlier called in and did point out, because I was getting to that fact, but sometimes I go St. Kitts before I end up back in Nevis, and sometimes in Tortola, and there's legislation to the point that Edric was making, so I wanted him and the listeners to understand that what Edric was saying was not totally correct. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, I was calling from St. Kitts actually, and I thought that most people would use the government supply for like cooking, not drinking, not they wouldn't just take water from the pipe and drink it, but certainly for cooking. If you're boiling the water, if you're making tea or something, they'd use that. You use the government supply. What I noticed, I'm in an area now where get desalinated water from the Marriott plant, I think it is. And there is a distinct difference in the taste. Now, I remember someone saying that because we rely so much on well water now, groundwater, that has lots of, not necessarily impurities, but certainly, I forget the term they use for it, but essentially a chemical, natural chemicals, that can cause, they can be harmful. Okay, if it's above a certain quantity. As a matter of fact, I remember a well here having to be closed because of, I think, the arsenic content was too high. All right, and so what I'm essentially saying is that whereas before we used to rely a lot on groundwater runoff as opposed to well. Okay, we apparently can't do that anymore. I think that is what I'm saying the government dropped the ball in that. You can't expect the 1960s and 70s and 80s infrastructure to collect water to be adequate when we've had so much development. Okay, it just didn't keep pace. So at least now we're going into desalination, which apparently you can monitor the water quality better, and it certainly tastes better, to be quite honest. And so I'm really surprised though that people still rely on the cistern water.
Why are you surprised that people rely on their cistern for water?
For the domestic, the cooking and drinking and that sort of thing.
Right. So I'm asking you, why are you surprised that people rely on their cistern for
Because I thought they would have preferred the government supply, which I assume, just like in St. Kitts, is chlorinated, is treated.
One of the things that we must be conscious of is having a feeling or idea about something, and it's okay in my view to ask questions about it, but to pass it on as gospel, we have to be careful with it. For instance, For instance, I remember a few years ago we had a discussion, and series of discussions, and it was thought that people were dying of cancer. And it was, all of a sudden an increase in it. And some person or persons began to assume or suggest that it had something to do. I don't even want to mention it again because it was so ludicrous, without any facts.
Right.
And they're thinking, oh, well, it has to be this, maybe to score points in a particular area, right? And it causes sometimes harm.
I agree.
And so on.
And it can be researched.
Right. So
Okay.
there are certain things that we can question, yes, but it must, up to that point, just be a question,
Yeah.
and
of
not
course.
implying
But
that it is a fact.
No, but the fact is, though, groundwater is different from the ground runoff. Is different from
But
the
of
road.
course, but in this case, what we want to know, right, is whether or not, based on the scientific evidence, that nothing is wrong with A or B in terms of your health. The difference in a particular instance might just be the taste.
True, but the difference in taste, by the way, comes from some impurities or
Not necessarily. Sometimes it is just how you are trained. For instance, walk with me.
Mm-hmm.
I get a Coke.
Mm-hmm.
It tastes good to me.
Uh-huh.
Oh, but you like a Coke, by your joker. You like ginger ale. Both of them cause the same impurities or purities to our health-wise. But it's just a matter of taste.
Yeah, but don't the government monitor the water supply that they're put into the pipes?
But that is what I'm saying. If they're doing what they're supposed to do based on the standards, etc., and we, assume that the government is sending, the water based on what the standards should be, etc.
So why would there be a reluctance then to use the government water?
It is a matter of choice. People have preferences for and that is what I'm saying. So we got to be careful with that.
Oh.
Well, let me
Okay, all right.
Because you see, to me, if you guaranteed a superior water supply, superior in the sense that it's chlorinated, it's monitored for to make sure that it's potable. It's coming through pipes that are placed there by government as opposed to any particular professional who might plumber or whatever do anything. That you'd think that people would use the superior supply, wouldn't you?
Listen to me. Here's how I'm going to answer that question. People talk about eating healthy, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. You tell people if you eat carrots, lettuce, and stuff like that, you probably will, all other things being equal, live healthier and longer, as opposed to if you eat mackerel, sauce, etc., correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Surprise. The majority of the people choose the mackerel, etc. Not correct?
Correct.
Yes. But,
okay. So that's the point I wanted to make.
It's been established, though, that if you eat mackerel, you have those effects, right? You see, when it comes to
caller, walk with me.
Mm.
All I'm trying to say is that the fact that something is defined as better. Okay, well, let me go to the Bible because I like to go there. They say if you live a Christian life and you follow the precepts of the Bible, you likely will go to heaven, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it also went on and tell you only few people will go there. because they're supposed doing what is right and so. And the other option is to do what is wrong, etc., etc. And most of other people going there, correct?
Right.
So that's how life is. Thank you. Yes.
I would like to give the caller.
Now, before you give the caller, I just wanted to make it clear that the point that you were making earlier, where the legislation is in place for not necessarily, it didn't say cistern, but it says water catchment, of which cistern is one, and you can use the other catchment thing, except that I think I also learned, and I'm subject to correction, Mr. Brand, when he comes back he can tell me if I'm correct. I think they edited that legislation and did put cistern. So the point is that there is something in place. Now, as happens a lot, putting laws and rules in place is one thing. Adhering to them is quite another. And the other thing that happens is we always saying that we should do this, we should do that, until we find out that the law is there already, and then we stop talking. Good evening, thank you for holding. Good evening, you're on the air.
Good evening.
Caller, what you want to do, please, turn your radio or whatever you're listening to down. Okay. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Oh, good evening, sir.
Yes.
This water discussion, this guy calling one thing again, it irritates me all the time. In Nevis, we don't have any heavy metal development of industries. So the rainwater is not affected in Nevis by chemicals. I grew up in that place and I drink water there. Even when I come home now, we have a system, and there's nothing wrong with drinking water. And it's the water is much purer than any other water. Because the other waters, they have to put things into them to keep them clean, and it becomes heavy for the stomach. So the most healthiest water we have is our cistern water in the Caribbean, because we don't have heavy industries with heavy metals. Thank you.
Caller, I can ask you a question?
Yes.
Based on what you have just said, I discern that you do drink cistern water?
Yes, I whenever I come home, I drink cistern
Okay,
water.
so I just doing a kind of little poll, because one caller's view was that nobody does, another caller was that people do.
Everybody in Bath Village I know drink cistern water.
Okay, just checking.
Most of the people in Bath Village have cistern water. We used to give away water because we have a large system there.
Yeah, but we can't happen used to it. We're talking about currently. You still do?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we don't do it as much now because
But you do.
we have their own system now over in Bath Village.
Okay, all right. I got you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, so the point I just want to make where that is concerned is how important it is that when people make statements that you have a responsibility, a civic responsibility, if you know contrary, which can help, you do it. Otherwise than that, if it stays unchallenged, people have a tendency to go with that. That's why sometimes people have the term, they say, correct the record. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert. Good evening, Mr. Herbert.
Good evening, you're on the air.
Yeah. The gentleman that called you, my teacher guy here from Sinkits, tell him that the water department in Nevis have a lab which they test the water over the years. And they do treat the water here in Nevis, the water that come from underground. A matter of fact, you could take your cistern water to the lab for check to see how good the water is and what's that, and they give back you the result in about 15-20 minutes. You get the result back. So people just carry the cistern water there to check at the lab right down Pump Road. They have a lab there. So is that? And the cistern, if you don't have your cistern covered properly,
all kind of things going in it. I got a cistern underneath here, gravity feed, and we use the water, and many of the neighbors come here for water to drink. So I don't know.
You mean used to or they still do?
They still do.
Okay, so we just correcting the record. So people still use cistern water, they drink cistern water.
Yeah,
okay.
they still do. I use it every. Well, I fill the cooler, that you know the cooler with the bottle in it. We fill the bottle and put it on the cooler regular.
Okay.
So it's nothing. The water is good. And again, we have a lab, a first class lab for over 25 years, where we go and test the cistern water. We go and test all the water in Nevis that come from the source.
Okay.
Anyhow, that is for my good friend, teacher guy here from Sinkit. All the best.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Webbo, I can attempt to give the gentleman some advice who called from St. Kitts.
Okay, let me get some advice from here and then we get back to you. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Mr. Herbert.
Yes, you're on the air.
I still use my cistern up to today, the water. That is the best. What we have to do is to secure it properly and clean it. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Boiling. When you get your water from your cistern, you boil it. At least for 5 minutes or more. And once you have boiled it, you know you will have taken out impurities, germs, as the case might be.
Once you have boiled any water, doesn't it have the same effect?
I cannot say that. I know about my own cistern. And
So you do not know that the reason for boiling is to kill whatever germs there might be because they cannot withstand
heat.
So you know that? Huh? Anyway, Fifield.
Yeah. Well, I just want to...
Let me just finish. Let me give the...
But thought you were finished.
Oh. I was told if you throw an ounce of Clorox into 1,000 gallons of water, it will give you a chance for killing bacteria coming from your system. But I will tell you.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hi, good evening, Webbo. Good evening to your panelists. The cistern water is the best way to go. All who have frogs in the cistern, you need to get them out and block the downspout. Block the overflow. Mesh wire. Frogs can't get in. If you have them open, anything can go in. Some of the reasons people stopped using the cistern water was 1, the monstrous ash. 2, when people started using asphalt shingle for economic reasons. The water from the asphalt shingle is not a very good thing. Not advisable that you drink it. Matter of fact, in some cisterns the water is dark from the tar in the asphalt and particles of fiberglass from the asphalt. So that's not safe. But we're getting to the stage now where some people are changing the asphalt shingle to galvanized. Once you have galvanized, you're good to go. The reason people don't drink the government water is because they use chlorine to purify the water. Who wants to drink chlorine tasting water? Sometimes you can actually smell the chlorine. So, all All you have to do is use common sense and go between and get to where you want to go. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. And using cistern water, or the discussion we had earlier, is in no way going backwards. As far as I'm concerned, if you have your cistern, you have a tank on the outside or something, a catchment, so that you could tie yourself over if water goes, that's improvement, that's enhancement, that's going forward. So, I mean, a lot has been said this evening, and we always come up with this discussion on water. And you only end up being talk shop because at the end of the day, some people still end up in the same rut that they're in. Now they're going to be ending up in the same rut the next time around. All those wise virgins who trim their lamp and had them ready, you won't hear any of them complain. All you hear complaining is the foolish virgins who didn't prepare themselves. In this day and age, everybody should have either a cistern or a catchment somewhere outside to tie themselves over in a crisis like this. As a matter of fact, this is not even a crisis. It's just a challenge. I mean, challenges will come. Is how you handle them is the ultimate solution. If you are not prepared to handle the challenge or look at the brighter side, then you suffer. But this is a challenge that everybody should have been able to pass over easily by having a cistern or some sort of attachment, water storage for a crisis like this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. This is Thought That Get Results. Edric W. Stanley, Conrad Nye Liebert, Roger Fifield. We'll be back after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts or call them at 466-4938.
Stanley's Real Estate announces a 102-acre lot for sale at Estates Bottom and Morton Hill Estates combined. The lot is located at St. George's Parish, west of Stockpen Estate and south of Saddle Hill. Call Mr. Edric Stanley for serious inquiries or more information at 869-665-5634 or 869-469-3868.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with Conrad Nye Liebert, Roger Fifield, Edric W. Stanley. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. I think, Roger, you wanted to get in?
Yes, Webbo. Webbo, what I wanted to say to a few callers ago, I think the last caller and the one prior to that caller would have make the point for me, in that when the caller stated that frogs are in the cisterns, you just have to secure the overflow properly with mesh wire, as one caller alluded to, and once the frogs cannot enter, they just cannot enter, and then you have to know your cistern, how long you have that particular body of water in that cistern, how often you use it. Some persons don't use it really often, and then you would have an idea when to clean. You could periodically look in it. Sometimes if you use it regularly and it's getting down, you can recognize that you have stuff coming from the pipe. Then you know your cistern need cleaning. So if you build a cistern, you build it to utilize the water and not just to have it as just for having its sake. You have it to utilize the water. How are you going to utilize it? You clean it, you secure it, and that's the point I really wanted to make, to point out to the caller and to all of us. We have to secure our water.
Well, I think water is life, and I think the importance of this discussion cannot be underestimated. Because here we are dealing with water, the purities and the impurities that we probably have to deal with. One of the caller, I think, made a good point, and I hope it does exist. Which he spoke to a lab somewhere at the water department,
Yes,
and for those who have cistern, they can go and ensure that the water is drinkable and usable. That is very important to me. But back to the legislation. Obviously, it's not enforced, because I am not sure, and I stand to be corrected here, that a lot of the low-income homes that's being built, that they are equipped with systems. I very much doubt that, really. And these are the government, sponsored or whatever. I think that if there is such legislation that these homes that the government have built in term low-income homes, they should have been all equipped with some kind of if it's left to the individual and you say catchment, then he or she can simply get a drum outside and so forth. If he or she feels like he or she needs it, so why the legislation then, really? Is it just something to say? It's encouraged by the legislation, but not an absolute. It's not absolute in its reach, meaning that every house really and truly not necessarily have to have it. It's left to the individual. It's left to the homeowners.
Well, the jurisdiction in which I lived, your house plans would never be passed unless a building inspector comes and sees the inspections, as the case might be. They will be passed, but periodic building inspections regarding your cistern and whatever you got there must be done by a building inspector, and as a result, the completion, as the case might be.
So that aspect of it is obviously not happening here.
Right.
Well,
I shouldn't say right.
Yeah, we stand to be corrected.
Yeah.
Because I realize that a lot of these little homes I've seen being built.
Yes.
They have no system.
What I can say, guys, is that persons from the building board or the planning unit, they do go around to construction sites periodically and do their own investigation to see if you are following the plan that you would have submitted. So I know that for a fact, but in terms of exactly what they look for when they go around, I am not sure. But what I can say that they do go around and visit the sites.
The building inspectors who would follow and be guided by the approved plans that you've got. And if for whatever reason you needed or you had a system in it and you're not building according to plans, you can be.
I know, but the revenue from the water department is an important revenue for government. Am I not right?
Well,
correct?
it is.
Okay, so the enforcement of cisterns. It seems to me like the government is acting against it, because if you get revenue from people using the pipe water, you insisting that everyone should have a cistern is limiting usage of the pipe water and in effect limiting the revenue of the government.
That is
So
correct.
can it be seen that way?
Yes. Anyhow.
I want to maybe be a little different. We here in St. Kitts Nevis, we depend heavily on tourism, and going forward I can see governments looking to increase the hotel rooms both on St. Kitts and on Nevis.
Let me just take this and come back to you, Roger. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webbo. Mr. Stanley.
Yes.
Webbo say the legislation is in place. The government just needs to lead by example. And I'll leave it there.
Yep.
Webbo, the other thing is one of the points that Stanley was making is the expense, or some of the expense of building a system.
Yes.
The tanks, the plastic tanks that they have around there, they're just as good. You could get one and you could use that as a system. You could attach a pump to it and have it installed so you can just switch over. You know, in the case of emergency, you can just switch over. The tank is only, well, I think some of them like 500 gallons or 1,000 gallons, 700 gallons, something like that. You don't want to be on that all the time. You want to save it for emergency. But it could be set up the same way a system is set up. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to come back to Roger, but in the overall debate, right, some of the factors you got to think is choices. Because you're building a house and you're deciding that it is you're not putting in a cistern because it's too expensive. Okay. So you do the numbers of how much the cistern costs and the value it will be to you having the cistern in place in terms of living thereafter. Then you look at the other amenities that you may have in the house in terms of tiling and other things in terms of the edifice and how beautiful it's going to look. You can also measure that against the cost of the cistern and what you get from spending $15,000 on tile as opposed to $40,000. You got a difference of 25. And what's the difference in satisfaction you're going to get in those tiles as opposed to the other? So when people are debating whether something is too expensive and etc., sometimes it's relative. And it's a matter of choice. So I just put that in again to say sometimes when we're debating, sometimes it's important to bring certain factors into the debate. Roger.
Yes, Webbo, thanks. Yeah, as I was saying, Webbo, tourism being our major industry, I am seeing more hotel rooms being built. And if more hotel rooms are being built, it means that the water, we would need more water, so to speak. And I suspect that is why the government is saying to us, we must build cisterns of catchment. Naya, the point I'm trying to make, Naya was asking, why would the government say to build cistern when they get revenue from the water main? Now, if you build a cistern and you want that cistern water to circulate, so to speak, around the entire house in terms of the different rooms, the toilet, the bathrooms, etc., you probably have to get a pump. Now, when you get a pump and you use the pump, what happens? You're using electricity. When you use electricity, the revenue that is generated from electricity, albeit someone going to argue and say it's a statutory body, but I would say that it go back to government. So you lose on one end, so to speak, and you gain on the other end. Now, back to the hotel rooms. As hotel rooms increases on the island or in the federation, the government would need to find new water, so to speak. How do they find new water? They would probably have to dig wells, put in more catchment so the water could be stored, and stuff like that. When that is done, they would now get more water to go to the hotels, bearing in mind that the hotels pay at a higher rate than we, the domestic users. So all of this, Naya, is coming back full circle, that the government could indeed benefit, even though they are asking us, domestic users, our homeowners, to build cistern.
Well, in my view, once you have been mandated to put in cisterns and you have to use electricity, it enhances your property. You can't lose. It's a win-win situation, as the case might be. But let me throw this in. The proposed desalination plant for Nevis, if I'm correct, maybe I may have heard it somewhere, and it might be for St. Kitts, Nevis.
One for St. Kitts, one for Nevis. I believe the Premier would have said when he was Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Is it going to cost us anything? Or is a grant from the UAE?
Yeah, it's a grant.
It's a grant.
Yes.
Maybe they could step it up and we could share it out among the prospective homeowners for building a cistern in every building that is now constructed in terms of a home. And forego
what?
The desalination plant. Give us the money, we give it to the people to build the cisterns.
Yes, that is sometimes grant specific. Huh?
I understand that.
You know, you can get a grant for a particular project and use it on something else.
It's given to a government, from a government
for a specific
government.
purpose.
For a specific purpose.
Yes.
Like it is for homeowners' cistern construction. Am I clear?
I'm listening.
So what's the advantage? What's the advantage in that approach?
No, we no longer going to build the desalination plant, but we're going to build water catchment or a cistern.
I don't believe, Stanley, in the long run. I believe in the long run, the desalination plant would be more profitable. In that, yes, bearing in mind that we are still hopeful that we'll get geothermal. Also, the desalination plant, from what I understand, is that to actually run it, it would consume a lot of power, current, electricity. Now, having geothermal in the long run, I believe that the desalination plant would be more profitable. You're getting the water from the sea.
Right.
It can't done.
No, it can't.
you know,
so give us the money.
You have geothermal. I mean, I'm being very optimistic. Yeah, we have geothermal. You know, so we have low cost of electricity. We have in the desalination plant up and running, and everybody living life happier. Less electricity,
less
more
cost.
water, more less cost on water, and you know, I think in the long run it would work out if everything is to fall into place.
Well, I do not know how much the desalination plant going to cost, but
it's a grant.
Once it's a grant, then we share out the money. We take the money and we share it out. Tell them.
But the grant is for desalination plant and not to be shared around to build systems.
We just change the label. We just change the label.
I did recognize that.
We just change the label. Instead of a desalination plant, now they're giving money to Nevis for the construction of every homeowner get a little cistern.
But Mr. Stanley, from what I gather, this is basically done sign.
Listen, man is a master of systems, and as a result, you just change the label.
I mean, we know that these persons who give grants from time to time, they do checking and see exactly how the project is coming along. We know that.
Okay.
You know.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yes. Good evening, Webbo. I just like to let Mr. Stanley know that's being dishonest. We are not dishonest people.
No. You're accusing me for all I'm saying. All I'm trying to say is that they're going to dish out the money.
You come back to that. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hello. Good evening. Webbo, this is for Mr. Stanley. Mr. Stanley.
Yes, sir.
Do you know that this desalination plant is already on island?
Oh, well, it's already here, so then let's put it up.
Well, then that puts puts your suggestion.
let's install it.
And the other thing is, I hear some complaining about the amount of electricity it will take. My understanding is that it's solar powered.
Good.
So then, what it takes is a non-issue. So, I say it's a go.
Do we have a solar farm? It comes with the solar panels.
My understanding is I come with its own solar supply, solar equipment.
Okay.
It's already here. It's in 240-foot containers. They're already here.
Good.
Okay.
And from listening, I hear that the construction for the facility has already started.
Where?
In Butler.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, Minister Brand spoke about that this morning in the Parliament.
Didn't have a chance to listen.
I didn't have a chance to listen.
Well,
thanks for the information.
It's on YouTube, Mr. Stanley.
That's good.
Inform yourself.
Good. Thank you.
All right.
Well, I guess we're cooking on gas then. But you know what? I'm here thinking, and I'm laughing to myself because the other day there was a big shower, and I couldn't get home because how much water on the road.
Enough rainfall.
The next morning I wake up, I gotta buy water.
Enough rainfall in Nevis to sustain us year round.
Do you hear me? The next morning I woke up. I grabbed 2 bottles and went to buy water. The water that come down all these guts and so forth, can we do something with it in terms of storage?
Yes.
Well, we had the discussion right here already.
Yes. A few
I mean, to me, that's a lot of water.
Look, he went into the sea. He went into the sea.
And
well, we've had that discussion.
And so now the dissemination part is to take it back from the sea and bring it back to us.
Whereas we can build water catchment before it goes to the sea. In my view, I told Mr. Brand about that.
Yes. I can recall some weeks ago I made a suggestion that I think the minister was on program too, where we can get catchments, something similar to what Antigua has in Big Creek, where there were heavy rainfalls some week ago in Antigua, and the catchment I think might have been at Big Creek. Well, I'm more familiar with Big Creek, and there's another catchment too in Antigua. It was down, and for the 2 days that the rain fell, what they reported is that they can now go for another 2 to 3 weeks with the amount of water that was collected in the catchment. And that is why I'm saying that we could follow suit in certain instances, and this is one such instance that where we can have these catchments around the island, and not necessarily for domestic use, but for agricultural use. We can use that water. Instead of using the water from the government main, we can now use this water for irrigation purposes for our crops and stuff like that, and possibly even to water the animals, the cows and stuff like that, and the small animals, the goats and the sheep.
Well, you have to come up with another distribution system in terms of water lines. And that is a major expense for government.
But these can be done, Mr. Stanley, close to where people farm.
Okay.
Instead of having maybe in one general location they have to run lines, like we run lines from the source, and stuff like that. New River, for instance, is agricultural area. Also Prospect and what do you call it?
Well, you put it from New River to Prospect.
No, you're not running lines from New River to Prospect.
Okay.
You're having a catchment in New River.
Okay,
you're probably having one at Prospect.
Okay.
And you're having one elsewhere.
Okay.
More elsewhere. That is what I'm saying. I'm not proposing that we have one in Prospect and we're running lines from Prospect to New River. Not at all. Not at all. That wouldn't make much sense. It would be almost like you're duplicating lines, so to speak, in terms of the number of lines that you'll be running and the expense that would incur in running those lines. So I'm not suggesting that at all.
We had divert a little. We have had several communication and recommendation for the people of Haiti. It pains me to see the breakdown of the authority in Haiti, and we somewhat warn Caribbean leaders from the mic, also the mic of on radio. Do something before something happens, and these hooligans in Haiti have decided that they're going to bring down the government, and they've been successful. I listened to a documentary from the BBC, Slow Radio, yesterday, Monday, And it's appalling as to what was said. And based on what's happening in Haiti, Caribbean leaders have dropped the ball immensely. And I try to figure out how come they didn't take heed, how come they didn't anticipate, how come they didn't become forward-looking as to what eventually could happen with these hooligans, with the attitude they've got, and ultimately to seize that kind of power. It's appalling.
Stanley, you said that Caribbean leaders dropped the ball.
They dropped the ball.
But I want to know in what way. And the reason I'm asking this, what I would say, didn't the Haitian people and the Haitian government knew what was coming? So the reason I'm saying this, you have to dance a yard before you dance abroad. What happened to the internal mechanism? You know, didn't they know that this was coming? Can't they see this before?
Sure they
the
saw.
other Caribbean leaders?
Sure they saw. They were crying out. And we were crying out here on Vol Radio for a few years as to do something. And it went on unabated. Made clarion calls from the microphone radio. And nothing has been done to the extent where these people now control 80 or maybe 90% now of Port-au-Prince.
But you see, Stanley, when the Haitian president was assassinated some time ago, a couple of years ago, they had an interim government, which I believe that the Haitian people would have felt comfortable with at that point in time. And then he kept putting off the elections for various reasons. And I believe that is what really get to the Haitian people. Look, we want election. You keep putting off elections. So maybe you are right. Maybe the Caribbean leaders could have said to their counterpart, look, have an election. You were basically placed there. It is time to have an election. And that is basically what the Haitians were saying. We need an election. So in that aspect, I can see your point in that aspect.
To be honest, they actually dropped the ball.
But you realize the Haitian situation is quite an advanced situation to what we had almost experienced a few years ago here. The might of the gangs, the power of the gangs. And when we are so fragmented socially and politically, these things can happen, because you'll be surprised to know some politicians would support some certain things, certain uprisings, some disobedience, some politician. These are the things that happen when we have a lot of fragments within the society. I mean, they start paying people not to commit crime here, you know. They start doing it. What would have happened if the public didn't do that or make that gesture? Even though it was not really a good gesture from my point of view. Other Caribbean islands have their problems. In St. Lucia, St. Vincent, I mean, things are out of control. They have to look at solving their own the gang problem internally first.
We are aware, fully aware. But you got to be able to stay on top of it.
Collectively, I mean, what CARICOM is doing about it? They're talking about all these things happening. I mean, well, CARICOM as a body, maybe they could have done something about it. But individually, I mean, we got our own problems. And as I said, the Haitian situation is adverse. But if we don't watch ourselves, You know,
quite so.
The gangs can get that kind of might and power and influence because all you need is some silly politicians behind them, behind one group, and side with the other group. It's easy to happen. It's not very difficult to happen.
We look back at some years ago with Dudos Coke in Jamaica. And we look at Tivoli Gardens and how Tivoli Gardens was created and stuff like that. So we understand, and they never wanted to give up Dudos Coke until the very end. So we have to, I still believe, look at ourselves, do some introspection of ourselves, and understand what we are thinking, what we are doing, and how it would affect not just us, but the nation and the wider Caribbean.
That's the last word. This program repeats at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute tomorrow morning. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock and join Keith This and That Scarborough at 8 o'clock on Thursday evening here for Government at Work. It's a good way to spend your evenings, all of your evenings right here in the Eastern Caribbean's powerhouse. Thank you all again for joining us. Your voice in the community, thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Nevis Broadcasting Company Limited or its advertisers.